audience than we have people.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. How are you?
You had a good morning so far?
You bet. How about you?
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
We welcome you here for this meeting of the Logan Airport Authority Board. We anticipate that some other members of the board and public will be joining us in the process. We do not yet have a quorum, so we can't take any action on the minutes from last meeting. But we'll begin the manager's report.
So our last meeting, I was asked to come prepared with where we are budget-wise and snow removal-wise, and I've gotten a printout from Jeremy Hudson from Public Works on where we are so far since January till now. We've accumulated $14,826 worth of labor to be reimbursed back to Public Works. We had a light snow year, so we were in good shape there. There have been some repairs that will be coming from that as well. We're in the neighborhood of about $1,900 with the current repair bills that I have for snow removal. Another update, we've had, since it started to warm up, we've had some paragliders coming to the airport. I spent some time with them doing some training, explaining expectations, going over what the current traffic patterns for the helicopters and the airplanes are, and a safe way for them to enter and exit the pattern in the area. Almost immediately started having problems. We had, on the second day, one of the paragliders illegally dropping a parachuter, which I addressed. I spoke directly with him and heard his explanation, and then educated him on what the federal aviation regulations are concerning those things. And I'm convinced that he won't be doing that anymore based on our discussion. But they continue to operate out there on warm. Yesterday afternoon they were out there as I was leaving about 6 o'clock. They were out there with their parachutes up, getting ready to go again. So we can expect more paraglider traffic out there. We do have a hangar that's up for sale, A29. That's John's neighbor down there, Jim and Zach Ekstrom, and they've been provided the list of the standby people, the people on the waiting list that have paid a deposit, and I think they've been contacting those folks to see if they want to purchase this hangar. They bought it within the last year and recently signed a lease. They were going to have a flying club, and I believe it's Zach, the son's an airline pilot, but they've decided to sell and they're moving on. One of the big projects that I became aware of down at the conference in St. George was our requirement for Title VI program for our airport, and it'll be airport specific, and that's something I'm currently working on. I've got some examples that I'm working off from, so I can plug in airport-specific portions that will relate directly to the Logan Airport. So we're working on that. Also, I'd like to extend an invitation to anyone who would like to come down. If it's been a little while since you toured the airport, I'd be happy to meet with you at any time and show you around, get you out in the truck and drive you around the airport and explain the traffic patterns and some of the challenges that we have, show you some of the things that are going well, And I'd be happy to do that if any of the board members would like to come down and go for a ride and spend some time with me, and I'd love to show you around. And that invitation's always open. So, are there any questions for me about the airport?
I haven't any.
Thank you. I'm going to take you up on your invitation to come and take a tour.
Okay. Whenever's convenient for you.
Okay. We'll now go back to call for a motion to approve the minutes from the February 1 meeting.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from the February 1 meeting as provided. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The next item that appears as A under the manager report is a discussion, approval of the landing fee. And at the request of our consultant, since he is going to be including that in his report, we'll postpone that till our next meeting.
Perfect. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. I think Ryan had the same thought. That just makes sense.
Yeah, so. Armstrong, update on what's happening in your,
What's going on?
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, they get
You can come on up, Connor. So Judd Hill and Connor Butterfield with Armstrong. So let me share there. So I asked to give a quick update.
Ooh, you echo.
An update on just the master plan process, where it's at, and the next coming steps. So kind of doing this not really as a discussion, more truly just as an update. So because there's a lot of information going on in the master plan. And, whoa, wrong button. Okay, so nice and small. Who remember their glasses today? So master plan is broken down into multiple sections, working papers, inventory and forecast. Inventory basically says, what do you have? Forecast says, where are you going? Facility requirements is, what do you need to get to where you're going? Development alternatives is, all right, you figured out what you need to get where you're going. How does that fit into the airport? And that leads to where we're at now. There is, with the master plan, there's a technical advisory committee, a TAC. And the TAC right now has the working paper number 3 with them that, for review. Gotten some comments back. Ryan gave me a lot of great comments that will lead to the next TAC meeting, which we'll schedule sometime in the next couple of weeks. I guess Tuesdays won't be good, but maybe look for a Thursday a couple weeks out. Sounds like it might be the preferred day to make that work. But the TAC will go over specifically the different alternatives that are presented, or the different ideas, and come up with, here's the final desire or for a design to go into the full airport layout plan set. Once you figure out exactly what you're wanting in there, then figure out what would be the cost and what would be the financial plan over the next 20 years to make that happen. That's incorporating the full capital improvement project list. How does it work with federal funding, state funding, local funding, or combination of the 3? So that's where we're at now. Just a quick overview of what how we've gotten to that. Here's your airport. This particular figure just shows runway, the condition of the pavements. Green is really good, blue is good, but is older, red is bad. And with this, red is bad because that is completely unfunded. It's only been up to local or state because and along with the crosswind runway 1028. It's in good condition because the state and local and you spent a lot of money to rehabilitate that several years ago. And the reason you had to spend that money is because the winds at the airport truly favor the primary runway north-south. Now, there definitely are times where the crosswind runway, the winds favor that crosswind runway, but the prevailing winds go for the north-south runway. And because of that, the FAA only funds the north-south runway. But in addition to it being windy, you're also a very busy airport. This is the operations current and forecasted. And on the far right, the black is basically the current. The FAA said you were way down here on operations, when in actuality, you were closer to 140,000 operations. When we did this in formula in 2023, the newest data was 2022, so that's why 22 is showing. But there was a significant discrepancy of what the FAA said how busy you were and how busy you actually are. And with that forecast, it normally is about a 6-week review from the FAA. This one took closer to 10 months because it had to go all the way up to headquarters because of what a large impact it has. Specifically, you can see in this planning period, it's basically at 200,000 operations a year, which is stretching the limits of a single runway, the primary runway that they fund. So with that, it's, okay, maybe you need to look at a second runway. Well, the ideal, given the winds, the ideal runway would be a perfectly parallel runway, but that would mean cutting out all of your hangars, buying a bunch of land, spending $50 to $100 million to build a second runway. You already have a crosswind. It's definitely can be beneficial to keep and maintain what you have versus try to go crazy and build new. And to help with that, one of the recommendations would be to look at an air traffic control tower. So this particular table shows all of the airports within 300 miles of here that have a control tower. And if you notice, for operations today, you're the 4th busiest around. And your forecast to go to 200,000. So the other number stayed the same. That puts you, obviously, if you grow, they're likely going to be growing as well, but just how busy you are. There's only 2 airports on there that don't have control towers. I included St. George on this list, though, because they are actively getting a control tower. And they have, not quite, a little more than half of what you have. But the consideration of a control tower is something that should be a realistic consideration, especially with multiple operation or runways. It's a very good safety thing. It's not something that happens tomorrow. It'd be surprising if it happened within a decade or within the decade, but something to be considered when looking at this 20-year plan. And again, this is one of those, it hasn't been discussed. This will be a topic of the discussion for the TAC meeting that will be happening and that the Technical Advisory Committee has been looking at. But it leads to a general possible layout of the airport. And this is that area that, like I said, just showing you where we're at, it's really not worth discussing at this point because the TAC hasn't had a chance to provide feedback, say tweak this here, turn that there, something like that. So this is what the TAC is reviewing now. So that's an update on the master plan. Any questions on the quick overview?
Will this, when it's all done, will it be a document that we can share with people?
Absolutely. So there will be it technically is one document, but there really are 2 main components. One is the narrative, and it's a couple 100-page document that shows past, present, and future of the airport. And within that document, there's the airport layout plan set, which, like this figure here, this wouldn't be in there because it's very basic yes, it doesn't look basic, but that's a very basic figure.
Right.
It would be probably anywhere from 20 to 40 pages of very technical information. Most critical component of an airport layout plan set comes to funding, the capital improvement project list. If it's not on the ALP, the FAA won't fund it.
Well, I'm just talking mainly about the whole master plan.
The whole master plan. So those documents, and usually they're presented with, here's the document. The hard copies will give you, a lot of times, one will end up in a library or in the commission office or council office, something like that. But yeah, they're absolutely documents. They can be, some places will put them online to make them available.
Okay, thank you.
So the airport's website could
Could link it.
easily have the access to the,
Click here to download the documents.
at what point, go ahead, Ryan.
Go ahead.
At what point along that continuum does the FAA weigh in?
After each of those working papers or those main boxes and sections, they have to go through and get approved by the FAA.
So it's incremental.
It's an incremental sign off. And then the final one will be, they will take the airport layout plan set, all the big maps, and that'll go through airspace analysis as well. So it actually, it goes through the planning group of the FAA, and then the airspace will also look and say, does this fit? Do buildings here, tower there, runway here, does it fit within the airspace? Is it a safe layout?
The FAA requires this master plan every 15 to 20 years.
The pretty common timeline is you do a master plan, and that plan is laying out a 20-year timeline. And usually about halfway through there, there can be an update of the ALP. So it'd basically be half of a master plan. And that really, whether that's at 10 years or at 15 years or at 5, it depends on what level of development. Are there any massive changes that might have happened within a community, within an airport, that they need to address things sooner, or they can wait till later. So
The FAA pays for this.
correct. And with this one, it's a normal FAA AIP funded project, so FAA is paying 90.63%, and then local and state are each 4.865% of the cost. And
The entitlement funds with the number, does that change the amount of our entitlement funds that we qualify for with a larger,
with the operations,
yeah, or does that have to be commercial in order to bump us into the next one?
as of right now, it's based off of commercial, or off of the enplanements. But there are definitely signs that that's shifting. It came around, the most specific that was around was with the bill funding, and during the COVID relief sets of funding, where it was not just general aviation and commercial aviation, like it's historically been with entitlements. Larger airports got significantly more, like with the bill funding. Most general aviation airports got $100,000. Logan got $295,000. So there are definite actual signs that a recognition of the different stages, that it's not just GA and commercial like it's historically been with entitlements.
Other questions?
Okay. Next kind of block on the agenda was capital improvement, and wanted to highlight a couple of upcoming projects as well. So just as you recall, I have this figure if we want to come back to it, but you've seen this multiple times before, of the capital improvement project list that just spells out about 10 years of projects, and using different funding sources for those. But in terms of directly upcoming projects, I'll turn this over to Connor. So.
Yeah, so instead of master plan, which is far out, this is hopefully going to happen April 15th. Again, that's pending weather. We'll kind of see what Utah deals, but hopefully they can start the week of April 15th. This is a signage project that we've talked about before. It's Mesquite Electric's the contractor. So it'd just be a 30-day project. It's going to be happening in 3 phases. It's not going to close the main runway, which is the north-south runway. But phase 2, which is the little purple section, will close runway 1028. But that shouldn't impact traffic too much. As we've seen, most traffic is on runway 3517. So should be a pretty quick project, 30 days, and excited to get it going so long as weather participates.
So this one's showing phase 1 project. It will have some back taxi. It won't have access to the end of 3.5. But the orange lines depict where closures will be, closure barricades will be laid.
How do you let the airport users know about the schedule and what's going on? I mean, do you have contact information for all of them that you email out? I mean, I'm sure you post signs and so, I mean, there are a lot of users. How do you?
There are a lot of users. So one, take as opportunities like this. I mean, that's the basis of a board in a meeting like this. This project's been discussed multiple times, so it has been known, and a lot of it then is at the local level. So step one, the project gets discussed during development. Then we're at this point, we're 10 days out, 15 days out. We just found out yesterday afternoon the contractor finally gave us a date. So come here and make sure people can see this on the screen. And then there's also airports use NOTAMs, notice to airmen, and what?
Missions,
Yeah.
airmen, whatever, same thing. But those are essentially for all pilots. You got to check NOTAMs. It's
So
their
there are
responsibility.
good ways to basically get the word out that
Yeah.
it's starting.
Huge broadcast that says, hey, just so you know, there's a construction project. It's not going to close this runway, but you'll have to taxi a different way. And
Perfect. I mean, I assumed it was in place. I
Yeah.
just had no idea.
So
Okay.
this NOTAM would say Alpha is closed and Bravo between Alpha 1 and Delta 1 would be closed. Phase 2 is the one that will block off and do the Delta taxi lane. So this NOTAM would be published to state taxi lane or taxiway Delta and runway 1028 are closed.
Yeah.
And then
And I don't need the specific,
No.
just as long as there's a plan, I
it's
don't
there,
need all the
but
specifics.
also, yeah, that way, because I definitely know some folks here are going to be flying out and be directly affected by it. So phase 3, it'll be shutting down Bravo from Bravo 1 all the way to Bravo 6. So
But
that
all
would
of
be
this happens in the 30-day period
Correct.
contract. Okay.
so that'll be back taxi on the runway. But
Yeah.
And they'll happen sequentially so that you don't have all the impacts at once.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Operationally, the big impact will be the closing of Bravo. because
yes, the
that
back
will-
taxi on 3.5. So operations can't go on very continuously. You'll have to space the pattern out, and pilots will have to talk to one another. And
When they talk about back taxi, that means you're driving
So it's
on
a-
the airport. Instead of going on the taxiway to come back, you're actually taxiing on the runway. So,
They're going the wrong way on a one-way street.
one way around.
That would be a good time
Unless the
to,
wind change.
that would be a good time to practice departures on 1028 and recoveries on
1-7,
17.
yeah.
And so particularly the school programs may want to consider changing their operations that week or so.
Make everybody all upset.
Let's practice crosswind landings.
It won't fully help because you're going to be back taxing no matter
We have radios.
which way you go unless you recover just on the one way. Yes?
What's the length of Bravo right there?
That's probably 7,000 feet.
Or, no, not the length, but from taxiway, Bravo 1 through what again?
What's going to be closed down? You're saying, yeah, probably 7,000-ish feet.
Bravo to Bravo 1 to Bravo.
There's an overview, or
So if the runway's 10,000 feet, we're like
Oh, you're all the way to the end.
50% of it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
7,000-ish.
Yeah, I'm just looking at which, like,
But-
taxiway from here.
the only one when that section is closed, Alpha 1 will be the only access to 10 or to 1735.
Yeah, that's what I was, thank you.
There's a control tower that you just talked about.
Other questions on,
Like the first week of May, second week of May timeframe?
If they start
If,
April 15th.
if they start April 15th, it would be, yeah, likely in that first week of May.
And how long will the Bravo be closed?
On that, I do not know the specific time of each individual phase,
Since it's the last one, probably a week.
but we will be able to get once things are going and the construction started, NOTAMs can be issued 72 hours prior is when you can publish it. So we'll work with them that if at the start of anyone, it will have at least 3 days notice, hopefully.
Is it continuous closed or only during daylight operations?
This is set up to where not to differentiate day or night.
Bob, you may want to send a letter to all of the lessees, letting them know the general plan and encouraging them to check NOTAMs for specific closures.
I assume we have emails for all those people, right?
We do have some means of access, not necessarily active email. Next, Connor.
Any other questions on signage project?
Next one came up were conversations at UAOA last 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. State said, hey, we think we can find some funding to do paint project. Paint had been brought up previously, and they can find funding this year for doing remarking. This would be a UDOT and locally funded project. And it was based off of the need from the last 139 inspection. So we broke it down into the runway, taxiway Bravo, Delta, and Alpha, and basically have figured out what it will take to repaint, and when it comes, these are, if you're really curious about how much square footage of particular paint is needed, that's what this is showing you. But roughly $150,000, $148,000 estimated cost of this project that UDOT said they will be able to help with match funding. Roughly, I think it's a 70-30 is what UDOT can pull off.
They're asking for 44,000 from us, which we have line item that covers that.
So this would be a project that would new paint was an issue since the last 139 inspection, but knew we'd have to wait for a little bit. UDOT at the conference last month said, hey, we think we can be able to help you if you can come up with a design and some numbers quickly. So it sounds like it's going to be able to work out. Yeah. So this will likely happen on this year. If you're looking at this map, you just saw the discussion of NOTAMs and closures. Can't use a runway if you're painting it. So recognize that the same type of way we just discussed the NOTAMs and the closures for the signage project. With the paint project happens, we'll address that in the same context of trying to do a phased approach to look at addressing these different surfaces.
It won't happen till it's warmer, right?
Correct.
Okay. So hopefully, maybe the students will, maybe it can happen after graduation, maybe there'll be a little bit of a break for them.
And maybe you could go through the steps of the painting in terms of removal, removal, the paint, and then the glass beads and.
Yep, with paint, so a lot of times the most common time that runways, taxiways are repainted are with a pavement preservation project. That consists of you fill the cracks, you cover everything with an rejuvenating oil or a fog seal, and you lay down a temporary layer of paint. It's temporary because that oil that you laid down bubbles up, turns white paint to yellow in a matter of days. Then you come back a month later, repaint it with heavier duty paint. This project we're looking at not doing 2 coats of paint because we're not laying down new oil on the asphalt. Instead, take the paint the red areas, it's kind of hard to see, but you can kind of see a couple of marks where there's a mark here somewhere in this section of Bob had gone out and just kind of gotten pictures and looked and said, hey, the edge stripe of the runway right here has flaked off, scraped off. It's not complete. So that area would be looking at paint removal to clean off that area. So not going to scrape off and remove all the paint from everywhere, but the problematic areas where it's peeling, you want to make sure that you have smooth edges that you're going to be tying into and repainting. And this one would only be looking at the final coat of paint, which is just a heavy-duty airfield paint, has glass beads in there, so when lights hit it, it reflects, and it's a nice reflective paint markings. Don't have a timeline on this. We have an estimated budget. We haven't done any full design on this yet, but we got design enough to be able to get some cost estimates to be able to get it to UDOT in the time frame they needed.
Then it'll go out to bid and.
Then it would go out to bid. It will be a pretty quick design period but it'll probably be, well, a week to 2 weeks of work in a phased approach. That stuff will be figured out during an actual design. That's the paint. So any other questions? So we come back to this if wanted. Any other questions on this project? This list will be here. Like I said, in the master plan, the TAC is doing that recommended development, which will lead into the financial planning section, which will correspond nicely with the upcoming addressing the CIP with the FAA and the state later this year. So this list we will be diving a lot into with the coming TAC discussions for the master plan. But like I said, right now it's based off of last year's 10-year outlook. And obviously we're looking at changing or adding some different things after the information that's come about with the master plan. So that was that for item B. And then incorporated into that layout were updates. There's been taxi lane India discussions started back in 2017. I think it was the first exhibits that we put together. Got some good feedback. Ryan and I had a chance to sit down for an hour or so at UAOA, looking at modified layout that basically leaves the existing road, entrance road, the same. It'll have to be kind of rebuilt to deal with some grade issues for India, but previous versions had looked at a new entrance road happening here, at which point you cross the taxiway at this location instead of crossing a taxiway at this location. So either way you're coming in, you're going to be interacting with a taxi lane, but with this particular layout, you can get a few more buildings in there. Remember, when looking at these kinds of layouts, they are not blueprints of exactly sized buildings that are going in the exact layout of them. Like for example, these 3 buildings here on the bottom, do they face Echo? Do they turn and face that interior? That depends on who wants to build what, where, and what the board approves. But on an airport layout plan, it's basically when saying hangars are appropriate in this location at about this size. But all of these will fall under about this size. Other than, hey, we're along this yellow new taxi lane India, it's looking at more corporate type hangars. Wouldn't necessarily want to build these 4 small ones that can fit on an extended Echo. You wouldn't want to put those along this section here, just because of how it's laid out, the particular spacings. Smaller hangars, smaller airplanes need less space than larger aircraft going to larger hangars. Comments on that one?
That's good.
And that's all we got.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
Any other?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
With this layout, it's recommended that we table the hangar request on Echo until the master plan, total master plan is laid out.
I think that's very wise.
Any
Totally agree
concerns?
with that.
Okay.
I think that's the thing to do.
Union Pacific update.
So, the last time we spoke was in this meeting. I hadn't yet received some information back. I did receive some information back in the interim between February 1st and today, and I sent that to you through email. And so if you recall, Union Pacific, they believe that they own what we're disputing what they own, basically. So we're disputing what they own, and they don't want to budge on that. And so in that email exchange, some of the board members were discussing possibly retaining a surveyor. At this point, Union Pacific is waiting for us. I told them that we were going to discuss it together, and that we would, that even the valuation that they were saying, 59,000 or whatever, or 57,000 per year, was totally unattainable for this size of airport and for the budget that they have, that we have. So at this point, Union Pacific is waiting for us to. I mentioned that our board was looking into getting a surveyor, and so right now my update is to ask you, what do you want to do? Have you retained a surveyor? What information have you gathered in the interim for me to communicate to Union Pacific?
You know, may I add something here?
Yes.
In the last legislative session, there was a new law passed that basically establishes a division within UDOT that deals with the railroad. That's their specific job, because as you know, Logan's had such challenges on our roads.
Sure.
Where we have railroad impact. And UDOT obviously is over, aviation as well, the airport. So I don't know if that new division would consider accepting, would it, help on this project, but it might be worth it, because again, they have a little more leverage because it's a state agency, they have contacts. So we're basically turning everything we do with the railroad over to UDOT to deal with, which is a huge win for basically all of us, everyone in Utah. So
Sure.
I think we should investigate whether that division might include aeronautics, because then they might be able to deal with them directly and put, again, a state can just put a little more pressure on them than individual small airport.
Yeah, I think that's a good move. I also think that we should probably make sure that we have more than just an informal looking at the records of the surveys that have been done in the past, so that we can be on the same page, and we don't just have to accept at face value whatever Union Pacific says they own. Has there been any progress on the survey, on getting a survey done, or?
Bob and I met with the surveyor last week, and he agreed to put us at the top of his list, and he just texted me the acreage at 9.25 acres that where our fence encroaches on their ownership, and
Sure.
he'll have the full plat to us later this week.
That would be great. So if we could get that information knocked down and make sure that we have that so we can provide it to UDOT, and I think you're completely right.
I'll get the contact information from the person at UDOT and send that to you.
That would be great if we could involve
Yeah,
UDOT.
Maybe they'll say, sorry, we're only dealing with roads,
Sure.
but it kind of seems logical because,
Right.
again, they're
And
I don't know whether any other airport other than us has an impact from railroads. So it might be that they're willing to do that just
right,
because.
so.
And maybe we ought to hold up on the expense of an appraisal until we at least find out, get some guidance from UDOT.
sure. Okay. Well, with that increased information, hopefully coming this week, then I'll be able to reach out to Union Pacific and let them know that we're not going to take their.
Remind me again what their acreage was?
approximately 10 times what Mr. Kerr just said.
They said 90 acres? You know. I'm just trying to,
So Mr. Judd has been a good help in this. His amateur survey skills are better than mine. He's looked through some of the records and made some calculations. And you know, the funny thing is talking to Union Pacific, I let them know that, well, there's this avigation easement. We own all the air above the ground. And not only that, there's also this zoning challenge for them where this property is part of the airport zone, and so nothing can be built there without the say-so of the airport board. And he said, yes, I understand that, and we agreed the highest and best use of that is continue to be a railway corridor with nothing on it, but they still think it's that 2,000% increase is what it's valued at. So we definitely need to make sure that we're pushing back on. They claim that they own a lot more than we believe they do, especially if our surveyors saying that the amount that we encroach on their property is only 9 acres. They seem to think it's closer to over 100.
So, they're claiming 9.45, the records show it, the biggest difference is, it all comes down to the 100-foot, do they have a 200-foot ownership on the center of the railroad tracks, or do they have a 66-foot or a one-chain center on the railroad tracks? And this, as it said, my amateur reviewing of the deeds and what's on the county GIS reflect the same thing that I found in the deeds, that north of 2,500, it's one chain or 66 feet wide.
mm-hmm.
South of there, it's 200 feet wide. The big discrepancy along the airport is that they're claiming they own 200 feet wide all along the airport for the south half of the airport. And so that it's really an extra 80, so 200 feet wide from the center line going towards the airport. They're saying they own 100 feet and you need to rent 82 of that feet in order to meet the fence. On the northern portion, they own 33 feet and you need to rent 18 feet. So the real question is, do they actually own 200 feet wide on the south portion of the airport? And that's where, from the 76 surveyor by the county surveyor, from the deeds that they reference, it all indicates that it's a one chain or 66 feet wide or 33 feet from the railroad into the airport. So that's a really big issue.
So, question on that one. If they can't build on it because of height restriction, they can't impede the airport. We have other places around the airport that we may not own, but they can't build on because of different regulations. What's the worst? I mean, I'm just curious our options of how severely we need the right-of-way if we've already restricted the building and protected the flight path and that. If that's protected through these other means, what's our biggest benefit by having the right-of-way? I mean, it may be the right thing, but I'm curious if it's the necessary
Sure.
required thing. If we
So
if we say,
the reason why we have that,
We have a fence.
the reason why we're renting is because we have that fence there, and if that fence is not there, then the FAA will not allow us to operate despite any
because
rules
of-
to prevent
because of the
building.
fence being there, is that an intrusion from is that a security intrusion kind of issue? I walk down that line because I think that one of those, if it's directed by the FAA or aeronautics, then that gives us another reason why FAA or aeronautics should be involved. And to that point, not just property between a railroad, but lots of times they have made the rules of how wide you have to have if it's their rules, maybe that's another, maybe we need to have the FAA at least weigh in, because if they're the ones creating the requirement to have a fence, I realize the fence is arguably on their property, but they can't move the fence or probably can't remove the fence. I mean, nor would
They
they.
absolutely could move the fence. If we did not pay them or come to some sort of agreement, they're well within their rights to tear down the fence that's on their property. We built the fence, it's our fence. And if they choose that they don't want it there, they can absolutely tear it down.
They could remove the fence.
That's
That's
correct.
the risk, that they could remove the fence. That's what we're worried about. And if they move it, they can't build it. If we've owned the airspace, they can't rebuild it closer to the airport. So the risk is that they could remove the fence. That's
Well,
what
no, the
we're getting
risk
down.
is if they remove the fence, we can't operate.
That's correct. The fence must be there according to my understanding of the regulations. The fence must be there. And if the,
FAA's regulation.
that's correct.
It's built as a wildlife fence.
You know, what the question I have is there not a meets and bounds legal description of the property they claim? I mean, why is there even a need for a survey if there's not a meets and bounds description of their property ownership?
Yeah, sure, please. I think some pictures would help.
There are several airports that don't have a animal fence or protection fence around them. That is not, every airport doesn't have that. So, you know, I've flown into several that don't have a fence like that.
Yeah, and to point, it depends on the airport and what's needed. I mean, there's tons of airports here that have at best, they might have a 3-foot, 4-foot cattle fence because there's grazing cattle around.
Right.
Others have 13-foot tall or 10-foot tall plus barbed wire on top that are heavily based off of security. So it really is, you will definitely see some good variations.
It's at least had a legal description, but it's not accurate.
Every airport has barriers around its perimeter, doesn't it?
Had all these errors that we're talking about.
Almost all do. There's definitely some that are limited, and most of the time it's going to be in a fence out for antelope and cattle.
Order the survey.
But it's unfortunately one of those things where once you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, because there's going to be nuances throughout.
Where the fence was on.
And I mean, a lot of it, some things, you can have airports that have very high security in places that are most likely to have to deal with people. And then the backside of the airport's a 3-foot fence. So, so the picture worth 1,000 words. This was the original layout of from 22 years ago. What we're looking at here is north is to the right, the runway's to the top of the picture. And they're saying that along this stretch, they own 100 feet wide, and then they own 66 feet wide on the north stretch. And then these are all of those deeds, a lot of them going back to that original land was done deeds in the territory of Utah, some of them going back. So we're dealing with very old records. But what I pull out here are going and reading the original deeds, how wide they are, 66 feet. Some of them were actually 33 feet. They only own 33 feet, or half of a chain. Because we're dealing with Union Pacific, but it was originally the Oregon Short Line, the OSL, or the, yeah, OSL. This will go a little bit more high-tech. This is the Cache County parcel map that you can get online GIS, and obviously airport top left, north is up. Here on the south side of this, the deeds correspond where you can see they own a 200-foot wide section, or 100 feet off from the railroad track. Railroad track is running right here. So the county GIS is saying south of the road, they own this 100-foot wide section. And then at the road, it goes to that 66-foot wide section right here. And then your fence is right about here. Sorry, mouse isn't working great, but it's just on the inside of their property. So, but the original lease and what they are presenting in this new lease says that they own this width all the way up to basically Bravo 1, or about halfway up the airport. And that adds a whole lot of acreage onto it. As far as you would ask about the historical, so here's their new lease exhibit. And you can see this hatched area here. This is saying that they own 200 feet wide or 100 feet west of the tracks into the airport property. But the county GIS doesn't say so. But that is where the majority of the extra cost is coming from, is this hatched area here results in acres of land that they say they own, and that's the potential, maybe not, based off of the county GIS.
We should just lease the 1 foot wide where the fence is. We don't need the other.
There you go. There you go.
Sorry.
And you would ask
The railway.
specifically, this is that historic, this is stamped by PBW, Ward, Preston Ward, who's the county surveyor in 19...
That's
Okay.
my brother.
Okay. So he did a survey as the county surveyor in 1976. The point of beginning is right here of this survey. Here's the OSL to the south. This corresponds to, oh, sorry. That point corresponds about with this point right here, not another, it corresponds roughly to 33 feet from the railroad track, not 100 feet from the railroad track. So there was a survey done that definitely does correspond, and this would result in roughly, what, a third of the total area that would need to be leased relative to what they are proposing. The point of a surveyor would be to say, okay, let's go with modern day technology and the full recording of the, or records search of all of the deeds to go with it. But there's a whole lot of information that suggest, including the county surveyor, that they only own 33 feet from the center line, not 100 feet. And that extra 67 feet times thousands of feet long equals acres, especially at the rates they're charging. That turns into tens of thousands of dollars.
And so the utility of spending a little bit of money to get a new survey that's not 50 years old, a new survey that shows those meet and bounds clearly with modern technology, and even if we spend $50,000 on it, which I assume that's not what it's going to cost, but even if we spent that much money on it, it would still be worth it, because they're hoping to extract, $50,000, $58,000 additional dollars per year than what we're used to paying for the foreseeable future. And so if we just take their valuation and take their acreage and what they claim, then it's going to be much, much more expensive. So it's well worth it to pay in the beginning to get an accurate picture with someone on the ground, not just looking at old maps or on their records back in Omaha of what they think they own. It's well worth it to make sure that we have a clear picture there.
The surveyor indicated to me that there'd be about a $3,000 charge on this survey.
So $3,000 versus $55,000 per year every year going forward.
You still have to negotiate with them.
Right.
So
So-
I would suggest that we've already started the survey. We don't need to approve paying for it, do we? Or do we?
I've got a donor that'll pay for it if we can't.
Well,
I think we should approve it.
yeah, well, I would move that we approve paying for the survey, and then we turn that documentation over to UDOT to pursue handling Union Pacific.
If they will, yeah.
Was that a second?
Second, with the addition of if they will. Again, I mean, I don't know if they have a specific parameter that it's
Well,
only
they're painting our
roads.
runway, so,
I know, exactly. It makes sense to me that they would do it.
It's
That's
certainly
why
worth
I'll,
exploring.
yep,
yeah.
So we could put explore with UDOT there.
thank you. I will accept that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve payment on the survey and that we approach UDOT to get what help we can from them in the negotiating process with Union Pacific. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
So I only have one follow-up question. Once the survey is completed, and how will that interaction with UDOT be accomplished? Will it be you? Will it be you? What?
I'm happy to help. If you instruct me to do that, I will do that.
Instruct you? Geez, I didn't know we could do that.
Given the legal ramifications, I think Taylor's probably the logical one
Okay.
to do that.
All right.
Great.
If you
Just so
don't
He's
mind.
been the interface this whole time.
When you have the survey, then okay.
Yes,
I just
and
wanted to make
I'll look
clear.
for that contact information from you or your office, and we'll move forward from there.
I was just trying to
Okay,
clarify
thank
how
you.
it's gonna go.
Okay. Dr. Jones, on his assessment, had originally asked that we have a special executive session of the board on April 15th. That appeared to be difficult, and so I think what he's doing now is meeting individually by Zoom with each of the board members, and he's meeting with Bob and I next Wednesday, and I think Ryan and the mayor both have scheduled. And at this time, he's going to be reviewing what he will present in the meeting that is scheduled, I believe, the 1st of June, 2nd of May. And the May meeting, it's anticipated that his assessment will be the primary agenda item for that meeting. It will not be an executive session. So you may be interested in attending and see what his recommendations are.
And that's the one we anticipate will take quite a bit of time, so we're starting the meeting at 7:30 a.m., correct?
That's right. We've blocked out 7:30 to 10, and anticipate that the room will be available during that period, Janine. And so it might
And
be,
everybody will be wide awake.
it might be entertaining, but the door will be unlocked, and if you finish before we do, you can leave. And Baron, you've got,
You guys going to be recognized for a minute?
you bet.
Just a couple things. I've worked many years with outreach and activities at the airport. I just want to announce we'll be doing our hangar hop on the 13th of April. That's a wonderful opportunity to bring the community out. Big band, swing dance, big parachutes, a nice fundraiser for the flight team. We'll do Girls in Aviation Day on the 21st of September, but the 2nd of May is commencement for Utah State. So all the faculty and staff will be at commencement that morning. But here, we'd like to bring Aloha Ellen. She is the project manager for the Run the Runway 5K that we put on in the past as a memorial fundraiser, the Frank Dillon Compress Scholarship. So she'll present a date proposal for the board.
Hello, I'm Aloha Allen. Like you said, I'm the project manager for Run the Runway. Our proposal date is September 14th this year. It's just an annual fun run that we usually do. and we would love to have that date.
And typically that's 7 o'clock?
8 a.m.
8 a.m. for the fun run. So
Yes.
we'll be out there by 7 to close the runway. It goes from 8 to 9, and then a half hour to clean up, only on 10-2-8 and Charlie.
And we provide the X's, and you provide the porta potties and
Correct.
refreshment stands? Okay.
We'll coordinate with the airport manager to make sure there's a NOTAM and all the information out on the flyers for the local entities that day.
And that's, you said it was the 14th?
And the May 2nd meeting is starting at 7:30, so it won't interfere with commencement. That's
We
oh,
start lining up at 7:30 in the
that's
morning.
7:30.
That's what time we're lining up. But any conflicts that you're aware of on the 14th?
It's usually the fly-in day, the second Saturday is usually fly-in, so that would match to the, I don't know whether they're still doing it on the second Saturday, but, is that right? Yeah. So that would be second Saturday, so that would match? Yes. I'm just checking to see if that's a conflict.
Second Saturday of September, are you talking about, or May?
No, second Saturday of September, right? Yeah.
Well,
On the 14th
I
for
was
the
a
fun
little-
run.
I was a little, like, second Saturday, I wasn't sure.
Sorry. Usually on the second Saturday, they have the fly-in monthly, and so that would be on the same day. I don't know whether those are coordinated together and you fly in and then you run your 5 and, you know, if there's not a conflict that way, I don't find a problem.
Not on our end.
Okay.
You know how it is though. We got crazy pilots out.
Okay. Sean?
Mr. Chairman, I might be a little bit confused now. Are we still talking about May 2nd for the next meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Carl, for you and Executive Zook, that would conflict with the UAC Management Conference.
It does.
Do we need to think about adjusting that date?
We can do it.
Or do we want to, I mean, I assume all these meetings are recorded, right? So they could go back and watch them later, but they wouldn't be here to interact.
Any other questions for us with the fun run?
Oh,
Just tell me the hangar hop date again.
The hangar hop is the 13th of April.
Thank you.
let's leave it for May 2nd right now. And Carl, would you and the executive decide whether or not, after you've talked to Mr. Jones next week,
Okay.
you and the executive can petition us to postpone it a week, or feel like you've had your say and that we should go ahead.
That'll work.
Okay. Any other items for the board? Yes, Mr. Parrish.
Brandon Parrish with USU Aviation, just extending an invitation to the board to come visit USU and tour our operations at your leisure. That's all.
Could give you a whole airport day tour.
Yes. You could get a twofer.
I could get a twofer.
If there's nothing else, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you for your participation. Lola, thanks for being here.